Okay, so let's assume that this is our sampling distribution. Again, our mean of our sampling distribution goes right down the middle. And let's say that in this problem, we know that the population standard deviation, I'll stick with the same as I did in chapter 6, is 100 with a standard deviation of 10. And let's say, just to make it easy to calculate, that we decide for this sampling distribution we have a sample size of 100. Okay, so in order to calculate the probabilities like we did before, like what's the probability that something will be above or below or between something, we need to be able to convert into z-values and then look up the probabilities of those, or we can use the Excel function, the normal distribution function. So for example, in this one, if we wanted to say, and also one thing you need to know too, when you're calculating the probabilities of the sampling distribution, in chapter 6 we said, like, what's the probability that a student or a person, the probability that x is greater or less than a certain number. In this, we're going to be looking at the probability that the sample mean, given a sample size of 100, is less than a certain number or greater than a certain number or between two numbers. So in this example, let's just say, what's the probability that the sample mean of, given a sample size of 100, is less than, we'll say, 102. Okay, so before, you remember we converted this into a z. Okay, and the formula was z equals x minus the mean divided by the standard deviation. In this problem, it'll be very similar. It's just going to be z equals x minus the mean divided by the standard error, which we just talked about a minute ago. So the formula is 102, the number you want to convert, minus your mean of 100, divided by the standard deviation, divided by the square root of the sample size. So you would get 2 over 10 divided by 10 is 1, so you'd get 2. Okay. So here would be your 102, here would be your mean of 100, here would be your size of 102, and you're looking for less than. So now again, you're going to do it just the same way. We're going to go look up 2 in the book, on the table in your book. And 2, the probability of 2 is 0.9772. And because this is a less than problem, then that is your final answer. If it had been a greater than, you would have said 1 minus that number, and that would have been the answer. So let's look at how to, oops, you can't see all that. So let's look at how we would have done this using Excel, because I'm sure that's what most of you are doing. We're going to do it just like we did before. We're going to use the norm distribution function. And this time we'll still put our 102 in there, and then we'll put our mean in there just like before. Now here's the difference. Instead of putting the standard deviation, you're going to put the standard error, and the standard error is this part right here, which is 10 divided by the square root of 100, which is going to be 1. Okay, and then we'll put true, just like we did before. So when we put that into Excel, here, we have normal distribution, and we have 102, 100, and then 1 for our standard deviation, because it is the standard deviation of the sampling distribution. True. And the answer using the computer is 0.9772, just like what we got doing it out by hand. So like I said, if you can do chapter 6, you can do chapter 7. The only difference is, compared to what you did in chapter 6, right here you're going to substitute in the standard error instead of the standard deviation. Okay. Same thing, if it had been greater than, you would have found this number and then said 1 minus it. If it had been between, you would have found the 2 less thans and subtract them. So if you're confused about how to do that, go back and watch my chapter 6 video, because I go through how to calculate all the different probabilities of the of the population distribution. Again, the only difference is use standard error right here instead of standard deviation. So I hope that helps you with the sampling distribution portion of chapter 7.